this is a this is a
Sorry about that.
no, that's fine. Look, this is a cross-CUR event, and we love that. Obviously, At Large is very much a cross-disciplinary organisation. So yeah, welcome. And with those small blips at the beginning there, well, let me give you an idea of how things are going to run. So we have some speakers who will speak roughly for about 5 minutes each, just to introduce some of their particular expertise and experience with career readiness and undergraduate research. So they'll come from different angles and different points of view. We're very privileged to have two of our former CUR presidents here, Julio Rivera, of course, and Jean Mikulicek. And so it's great to have folks that have been at that level in CUR to join us today. A very important emphasis on this topic, obviously, in their thinking. We also have Nikunj Jain, who's coming from industry. He runs a engineering-based company. It's also a design company. He's going to bring us some sort of ideas there about what it looks like from an industry perspective. So he's coming from outside of the academic world. And then we have a number of our members from At Large who are going to bring their experience to that. So the speakers will actually go in the order of Julio, Jean, Jennifer, who has a humanities background, Nikunj, who's coming from industry, Mona, and then Duke and myself will bring some topics in from everything from the STEM areas to experiential learning. So that's going to be the first part of our session. And then the second part will be breakout rooms. And we were just confirming the firm sense of what those breakout rooms will be, because we played around with this for a couple of weeks indeed, working out what we'd have. But you'll find there are breakout rooms that focus on team building, on assessment, on innovation, on skills mapping and the NACE work that Jean's done. And people might know some of that because she's published on that. Industry and business generally, and Julio will be leading that one. And then we'll have some activities around funding and grant writing that you'll be able to go along to that session and talk about that. So that'll be the second sort of breakout from the speakers. So that's the second part of things. And then we're going to have a reporting back and a wider discussion. So the 2 hours are going to be pretty full. We have written in the idea that if we get a little exhausted, we'll take 10 minutes break and come back. We really love to finish today with a kind of forward-looking, future-looking approach to things, and to really sort of finish on okay, where do we go next? But I think just to finish up before I invite Julio to speak, one of the great things about this in reaching out and saying, come along and talk about it, was the amount of interest across the nation. And it really was fascinating to see how many people decided they'd like to be with us today. So that's a really good indication, I think, that there is interest in this. In terms of having answers to questions that we're still exploring. And there's also interest in it from how we answer other people from outside of our world who might say, what is the point? What are you doing? Has this got anything to do with careers? So, you know, in many ways, I think the answer is, yeah, we want to talk about this, and we all obviously are passionate about how that might relate to what we might tell others about our undergraduate research work. So yes, if I could then, rushing straight into it so as not to take up our whole half an hour doing introductions, can I turn us over to Julio Rivera, who many of you will know has been a CUR stalwart for many years, and indeed a leader of CUR in many ways. Over to you, Julio, to talk a little bit about your experience.
Thank you, Graham. What I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about undergraduate research and how it ties to business and industry and those kinds of things. I want to start by talking a little bit about myself, just in the sense that I have an eclectic background, which plays into this in some respects. I professor of applied business analytics. I teach marketing. I teach data analytics, but that was not always the case. And I actually am trained as a geographer and taught human geography and GIS for a long time. And that's actually where I got my start in business and industry, was through geography. Less so in a more traditional sense that you might want to think about. In terms of undergraduate research, to be honest with you, you know, I fell into this realm of tying business and industry by accident, and I happened to be a mentor of mine who also did a lot of consulting, but I was able to kind of take a lot of the things that he did and bring that into the classroom with students. and it became valuable. And as I looked at where my students were going in terms of their jobs and their careers, I began to look at the tie between the research skills that I was working with them in undergraduate research and what business and industry, what employers were asking them to do. This included writing, this included, basic library research. This included obviously data analytics, which is a lot of what I do with geographic information science and statistics. But all these things kind of combined, and they combine in different ways for different students. So there's not one formula to this. Long before they were fashionable, in my own classroom, I was using course-embedded undergraduate research. In fact, long before it had that name. Before I was a CUR, I was kind of doing these bigger projects to build skills. And I think that's the most important part as you think about students and you think about students in industry, is employers are more concerned about what students can do rather than their particular degree. They'll hire anyone with any degree if they can do the things that they need and want, and they can come from a variety of degrees. So the skills that we teach students come in a variety of majors. There's no one major. Particularly, I would say, business is not necessarily the major that businesses are always looking for. So keep that in mind, that your discipline may be extremely important for business. But I would say as you build your CURs and you build these skill pieces, one of the things is to talk to businesses, talk to employers. What do they really want? And the question always is, well, how do I get to know these people? How do I find these people? It's because you just don't show up at a business's door and say, so what do you want? There are ways to do this, and probably in your institution, you have luncheons where businesses are invited in for an event. Things like that. Get yourself invited to those. Sit down at a table with a bunch of strangers and begin to ask them, what do you do? What is your business about? How do you do that? And and let them get to know you a little bit as well. Tell them about how you prepare your students. And you'd be surprised the number of contacts and the number of people in your community who will all of a sudden find need for you and find need for your students, and will ask you to do consulting jobs, or ask do you have a student who can do this? And so many of my projects that I have done in Southeast Wisconsin, particularly with business and industry, have come through these kinds of contacts. And sometimes they're very lucrative. One summer I had 5 students working for me. And Graham, how am I doing in time? Okay, I'll finish up quickly. Please know that you can arrange these in a variety of ways. You can be the consultant. You can send your students off to work somewhere. They can be research internships. They might not be research internships, but there are a whole variety of ways that you can do this. So I'll stop there. We can talk more later.
Thanks. That's brilliant as a kickoff there, Julio. So yes, indeed, you can talk later with Julio directly if you join his breakout room. So he will be one of the moderators. So indeed, pick him up on some of those points if you'd like to and explore with him. Jean is up next again to finish the presidential theme for the afternoon. So over to you, Jean.
Thank you, Graham. Good day, everybody. Delighted to be here. I'm Jean Mikolajczyk. I am a former president of CURS, like Julio. 21-22 was my year. Have been involved in CUR for many years, and I'll talk a little bit about where I come from as introduction into this as well. So I'm a sociologist by training, and had served as chair of sociology. So the connection between what I was doing in my classroom and the skills, knowledge, and dispositions that students learn and gain through sociology need to be translated to the workforce. Those are not easily articulated, much like many of the humanities, other social sciences, and the arts. And so this has been on my mind my entire career, and I, like Julio, embedded undergraduate research in my classroom before I even knew what those things were. That was part of how I was trained. And so, like many of you, have been swimming in the sea of the value of undergraduate research for our students, for our communities, However, we have not necessarily been able to make the connections and articulate the value, I think, as best we can. So Luke, can you pop up my slide there? So I'm going to talk, I'll go through maybe a little history here as you look at this slide. You've got the benefits of undergraduate research, which hopefully most folks are familiar with, and then mapping them to the NACE career readiness competencies. So hopefully we all know the benefits have been well established in the literature as a high impact practice, helps all of our students advance, particularly our underserved student populations. Increasingly, our students are forward focused and reflective of the connections between their higher education journey and their next steps of graduate school or directly into their careers. And research tells us that undergraduate research advances professional preparation, community and critical thinking skills, and self-efficacy. There is a substantial body of evidence demonstrating the value of undergraduate research, as you know, for all of our students. Not only in these areas, but what we see in traditional areas, retention, persistence, graduation, as well as data consistently demonstrating the advancements in dispositions and social psychological constructs, such as confidence, ability to work independently and overcome obstacles, increases in self-efficacy, cultivation of science identity, clarification of career path, leadership and professionalism, and enhanced our learning, communication skills, critical thinking, teamwork, greater understanding of the research process, technical skills, data analysis, competencies, all of these things that many of you have identified as learning outcomes, seen growth in your students. I have generally listed here on the left side. And as we know, making that connection, these valuable knowledge, skills, and dispositions gained through the undergraduate research experience often appear as employer priorities in making hiring decisions. To the degree that we can help students understand that, clarify that for ourselves and highlight it, the more our students will benefit from these experiences. Recent data, 2021, out of AAC&U's Heart Study on employers, shares that employers are 85% more likely or somewhat more likely to hire a student who had a mentored research experience. However, the breakdown comes in how we are talking about undergraduate research and career readiness and how we're telling our students to talk about that. So very much what we do as academics is doing exactly what we're doing now. We're talking about undergraduate research. And then when we coach our students, we're teaching them to start with undergraduate research. But what we really need to do is flip to the skills, knowledge, and dispositions and lead with those, because those are the things that talent recruiters can understand and value. And you see here on the slide, the mapping, some of it quite directly from the NACE career readiness competencies. This is the new ones that they put out in 2021, what employers are looking for: critical thinking, teamwork, communication, and technology. We're very comfortable talking about those in the academic world. Some of the lesser ones that we don't really use that language: professionalism, career and self-development, leadership, equity and inclusion, as part of the research process, I would say, are not necessarily what we identify in learning outcomes, but often, and that's kind of why I have them bucketed with that grouping on the benefits of undergraduate research, that there are pieces of those that fall into those NACE career readiness competencies. So to the degree that we can educate ourselves and then highlight and educate for our students, leading with the competencies, the language, the value that employers or prospective employers are starting with, we can really help our students advance in the world. And I'll hold it there.
Fabulous. Thanks, Jean. I love that, how we tell our students to talk about. I think that's a great, I've never really thought of it from that point of view. You know, what do we tell them? How do they talk about that? That's brilliant. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Ready for the slides. Hi, everyone. I am Jennifer Thorington Springer. I'm a faculty member in the Department of English at IUI, which is Indiana University, Indianapolis, used to be IUI. I'm also the Associate Dean for Student Affairs. And so next slide, please. So a lot of what we're doing these days is very similar to what I'm sure a lot of you are doing, which is to take a look at how, as administrators, we can think more about encouraging our faculty to think more about integrating the career competencies into the courses that we teach. And most recently here in the School of Liberal Arts, what we've done is that we created a workshop where faculty would have an opportunity to learn more about integrating career competencies in their courses to ensure student success. And, you know, it's always also efforts to help students recognize, understand, and share their marketable skills needed to be prioritized. We wanted to make sure that we were going in that direction, but we wanted to do it in collaboration with others across campus. And so Jean, you know, shared with you a lot more about the competencies, but I'm going to give you an example. It's kind of drafty, but though I was kind of supporting the effort, I also wanted to participate as a faculty member. And so we collaborated with the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Division of Undergraduate Education, as well as encourage students to attend that workshop so that they could give us some insight on where they felt they were in terms of their career path, what they felt like they got, the skill sets that they got out of the courses, or what they would like to see more of. And our faculty had an opportunity to ask students questions too about where the gaps were. Next slide, please. So basically, the charge was for us to select a course that we already have, and we were expected to integrate a career competency. Also, while there are the NACE career competencies here at IUI, we have the profiles of learning for undergraduate student success, and there are about 4 of those, right? We have the communicator, problem solver, innovator, and community contributor. And I will drop a link to that in the chat later if you'd like to take a look at that. But we weren't trying to cover as many of the competencies. We were just encouraged to include at least 2, one from our profiles, one from NACE. It was incentivized by a grant that a colleague had. And so we were rewarding faculty for actually participating. And the hope is that once we, you know, come together again and we realize where the successes are, we're hoping that we'll be able to build this to scale. But basically, we were also supposed to talk about how we were going to introduce the competencies and how they'll be practiced, and also an assessment component. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to try to go through really quickly. So the course that I chose was my L245A303, and it's Intro to Caribbean Literature and Culture. But it also has an independent study component to it where students will get to experience the course naturally as it's designed, but there's also an opportunity for some of our honor students, as well as students who have been mentored by me and want to continue working with me to complete undergraduate research, right? So they can come up with a point of inquiry and do the research necessary for that. Next one, please. Next slide. So the profiles I chose, community contributor, communicator, and for NACE, I looked at teamwork and collaborative endeavors, and also leadership, because with the undergraduate research, if they're leading that project, they're really being exposed to leadership skills. Next slide. Okay, the contacts and course objectives, I won't list all of them, but really and truly, it's a cultural immersion through the various texts that we'll read, and students have an opportunity to discuss and examine different types of perspectives, right? And look at global issues and kind of look at how those align also with local issues. Next slide. All right, so the ways in which I hope to introduce these competencies to students would be in about 3 ways. One would be the course syllabus, the other assignments, and also class lectures, and using that opportunity to help students to understand what the skills are that they're learning and, helping them to think through them and how they in turn can market them and how they're useful for them when they are thinking about their career paths. And the goal, of course, is to just normalize talking about these skills throughout the semester. Next slide. Okay, so I'll talk about an assignment really quickly. There's usually a creative activity where students are working together. So that's where you're going to get their ability to collaborate, and they'll be able to talk about challenges and how they address them. More importantly, for the students who are doing undergraduate research, they too are going to have the opportunity to engage with the other students, but they're also going to be engaging with me as their mentor, and I'll have an opportunity to talk with them about the specific skill sets that they're going to be attaining as well. Next slide. And there's a rubric here for the assignment that I can share more about later, but knowledge of the subject, communication, creativity, and also students will have to share more on how they were engaging in the actual activity. Next, and more importantly here, the assessment. I do plan to have some semester reflections. So at the very beginning, there's some questions I'm going to ask all of my students, those who are doing undergraduate research as well as the others. But I want to know, what is your major or your major interest? What's the career path? Do you have one in mind? Where would you like to find employment? And importantly, what are the skills that you think you need to be prepared? And how could this course help you to reach those, to gain those skills? And just thinking about how I can prepare them for life beyond IUPUI, but also asking if they've visited our career development office, helping them to realize that we have resources in place to help support them. Next. There will be an end of the semester reflection as well, where I'll ask them if they didn't have a major or career focus, do they have one now? And do they feel, what are the skills that they think that they've attained, right? I want them to share an example of one of those skills as a communicator, as a leader, right? Especially for our undergraduate research participants. You had an opportunity to work on a group project. What was your experience doing that? And give an example of how you worked well with others. Describe a challenge you experienced, how you address that. And importantly, with this course, I always want to have that global piece and that sense of learning about others. What was the perception about the Caribbean region before you signed up for the course? What is it? How has it changed? And what influenced that? Is it the perspectives that other students brought to the table? And do you feel more prepared to engage and communicate with others? So again, all of these questions tie back to the career competencies that we were going to be focused on. Next slide, I think, and that's it. So I hope to talk a little bit more about that later. And I plan to join Jean's group. So if you're interested in learning more, I'm happy to share.
That'll be the powerhouse group, right? So that's going to be the one to go. That's the one to beat. So thanks, Jennifer. Fabulous. So thank you, Drs. Rivera, Mikulajczyk, and indeed Springer. So we've actually had our coming from our academic world approach. I'm going to bring in somebody now who's coming from a little bit of a different approach. And I just want to remind everybody, we're going to have plenty of chance to talk about this. We're going to have breakout sessions for about half an hour, and then we're going to have a kind of round table, if you like, of everybody back. So you'll get the chance to ask folks things a little later on. We just want to get a few things on the table here to play with. And let me just read a really brief two-liner for Nikunj Jain, because he's a really interesting guy. I've had him talk in the Honours College with Honours College students here at Oakland University in Michigan. And he really charged people up about what their projects were related to in terms of their future careers, not least in innovation. So he's described as a creative mind in a corporate suit, an engineer, a vehicle stylist, a corporate strategist, bringing in form, function, and the ecosystem. He's a specialist in enterprise innovation at CGS Advisors, and he also works as an entrepreneur in solar EV, not just solar EV in America, but also in rural India. So welcome, Nikunj, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ram. So I think you've pretty much said everything I was going to start with on the background, so that's great. So if anything, I can start with by saying is the word curiosity. as I was listening to the presenters before, and reflecting back to my days of being an undergraduate, of why I took the path that I did, it all comes back to curiosity. So I was first always curious, how does a car work? And I've always loved automobiles. I've loved to always drive fast and get places. So the engineering first caught my attention. Then it was the curiosity of like, well, now that I know the engineering, what happens beyond? What happens to the design? And that led me to like, well, what does the design of a car dictate? How does that work? Then that led me to the curiosity of, well, these cars look great, they function great, they have a great price. Why is the company not making it? What goes into the thinking about, the corporate side of things? So that's kind of where I moved more into the corporate suit of doing an MBA, working in a big global OEM in India on the innovation of what does a corporate need to do in order to get these vehicles out. And in that process, I ended up also working with a lot of rural farmers, the rural parts of India, on how does innovation really affect them? How does this curiosity that I had, kind of translate into their industry? And that's kind of where I've been with the Mahindra Group as well as with the CGS Group, is how do you enhance or train this innovation skill inside you? So the broad way of saying it is, what is your curiosity? What do you want to learn? Then it comes down to, well, now that I know something about this, how do I make it better? What are the stop gaps, or what's preventing this solution from coming forward? So any idea that we have evolved comes down to what was the root of that idea, what really started that thought process, who was really feeling that main point, and now how do I really understand the core and start building it out? So that's what's led me to what Graham just talked about. I have a startup called Thought Labs. We are building a solar electric vehicle that becomes a mobile microgrid for developing countries that don't have an infrastructure or a power infrastructure. So that's reversing the entire problem that you have an electric vehicle that requires infrastructure. I don't know how many people are reading about the Teslas getting stuck in Chicago and not getting charged. Now this is the other way around, that the electric vehicle becomes the charging infrastructure that powers people's houses. So it really is taking that entire question and turning it on its head of like, well, what would happen if? And then you go down that rabbit hole and evolve that thought process. So that's basically where I come from, is the world of how do you take an idea, go to the depth of it, understand why did you think about that idea, where else can it be applied, and then start building it out. Now, for an undergraduate research, I'm trying to think back to when I was at College of Creative Studies. We did a research project around how can you charge electric vehicles that don't have access to a charging network. So think about your streets of New York. You don't have a plug point everywhere. And at that time, we went down this rabbit hole of a startup, and I still kick myself that I should have just gone through and done the startup, because there's so many of these companies now coming out of mobile energy that they'll come and plug in and charge your EV for you on the street. So that's taking the entire charging infrastructure grid and making it mobile. So if you think about how do you do your research, I would push you a little bit one step further, is to try and think of it as a startup, to think of it as your own company. Where is this problem happening? How are the people getting affected? Because for all you know, that may be a problem that someone's not solved, and you may be trying to solve the next billion-dollar answer. And there are enough and more funds and companies. As recently, there was one out of VentureWell, which was funding $25,000 to any student that could prove that their idea had good resounding thought behind it. So there are enough and more tools out there to help build it, but it starts with, hey, here's an idea. I'm curious of how do I help X achieve Y? How do I help understand why this certain group of people have this problem, and how can I help alleviate that? So that's where the skill of innovation, everything the previous presenters have talked about, the critical thinking of why, the idea of where else do people face the same problem, and then finally the core of all of this is continue to stay curious of how do I explore more ideas around it. So that's in a short about me, about my thought process, and that's led to where I am from an industry as well as an entrepreneur.
Thanks, Nikunj, and we're all super thrilled to hear that your undergraduate research project eventually has led to you being an entrepreneur in industry. So, you know, we can report that to many people. I'm sure we will.
Yep, absolutely.
So we've got a couple more just comments before we start to kick off the breakout session. So we'll be a breakout session on innovation as well. So again, if you're interested in some of those areas that Kunj mentioned, it could be one you go to. But Mona, it's over to you. We've got some comments just briefly on assessment and self-assessment.
That's right. Thank you so much, Graham. I am delighted to be here. A lot of my background in undergraduate research overlaps with Julio's. And so I am a full-time faculty of biology at Tulsa Community College, and all of my students, regardless of what format they take my classes in, participate in a CUR. And what I do is I track their awareness and their perception of how we are fulfilling some of those NACE goals in my course. So if you want to learn more about that, I hope you'll join my session. I think that anyone who's working in this use-inspired space and the future of scientific research can feel overwhelmed sometimes. So that's what we'll be talking about in my breakout group.
Good self-promotion there. I like that. This is the way we want to go. Actually, the thing that always strikes me about Mona is that youth-inspired space thing was not something I knew as a concept. And I think anybody that likes the sound of that could join Mona for a bit more of that too, because I think it's a fabulous aspect. Let me just then turn over to Duke, who has been the dynamo between me and you. Let's not tell anybody this, but Duke did all the work. So basically, Duke is the one. Over to you, Duke. Just you want to touch on some of the STEM things you've been doing. She indeed has been. There's been projects that come out of that university as well that maybe you'll touch on, Duke. So over to you.
Thanks, Graham. I'm not sure how much of a dynamo I can be, but I'll try. So yeah, this whole thing came about with some conversation between me and Graham, and before I know anything, we are organizing this workshop, and guess what? Here you are, and thank you for coming and showing interest in this. My theme, my specific angle for this was something built on NACE, and also the employer survey that the Center for Education and Workforce in Georgetown University put out in a report that's not just employer and universities, the college and universities like NACE does, but it is kind of data mining through the entire US, the Department of Labor and their own database, and to figure out what the employers are looking for, whether you're college graduate or some college or the high school degree, and what are the basic needs. So that going like data mining beyond NACE, and guess what? They came out with very similar skills, whether you have a college degree or not, but the skills that are the cognitive skills basically for white collar jobs and the other non-manufacturing type jobs, where again, communication, critical thinking, teamwork, and a lot of very similar things that NACE is pointing out. So I kind of started thinking about, okay, I teach in STEM and I do research, I mentor research in STEM, and we are kind of still stuck on content mastery. So my students learn a lot about one topic and they present to, like I'm a geologist, and my student researchers learn about geology and they present to other geologists and try to be writing and talking to other geologists. And that's not exactly the type of communication skills that I can see them using in a broader context. So I kind of changed my approach to like instead of a research group, now I mentor a research ecosystem. So I have 12 students right now from 8 different disciplines. So geography, geology, English, sociology, graphic design, physics, computer science, and I co-mentor it with another faculty, with the physics faculty. And together, like all 12 students, together they're working on 6 discrete and different projects, helping each other. So they are forced to communicate across disciplines. So my geology students have to know how to explain their project to a computer science student, so the comp sci student can write a code that they can use for collecting data that applies to geology. So there has to be this communication for actually getting some purpose done, not just explain your research, but get some collaboration going. And my social science students are talking to my geography students about culturally appropriate approaches that we are working with tribal knowledge keepers and indigenous tribes. So how do we just not go into like a Mack truck and say, hey, we know everything about your problems and solve your problems? Communication skills that you don't learn in a classroom. So that's kind of what we are doing in our research group. So I will have a breakout room if anybody's interested in how did we manage to get this in transdisciplinary. It's not interdisciplinary because they're solving a problem that goes beyond any single discipline. And the students from different disciplines and backgrounds and knowledge and skill levels are coming together and just working together and actually getting some big outcomes for professional presentations. So if anybody's interested, welcome to my small group thing.
Thanks, Duke. Thank you, thank you. So very briefly, because I said I'd say something not in contrast, but maybe just to add some of the creative arts areas. We know that those who attend CUR, and we also know CUR generally, is as passionate about our creative practice people as we are about those who might be doing bench-based research in a lab. So it felt right to just finish with a couple of notes. I used to be a dean of creative arts and then ultimately creative industries before I got super passionate about honours education and shifted to a honours deanship. And what we saw with the creative industries areas, the creative arts areas, was a substantial shift in the way in which industry worked with the academic world. It was not that long ago when industry considered undergraduate projects in the creative arts and industries to be not quite up to speed with where those industries were. They were fast-moving industries, particularly obviously in things like leisure software and the media generally. There were industries that needed to do their own in-house research because they really needed stuff to happen to a deadline that wasn't the academic deadline. We know that that sometimes is the problem with our collaboration with industry, is that universities have, dare I say, a slightly different sense of time to the outside world, and you don't always get a great response when we want to work in a time frame that's more academic. So it used to be we had a hard time getting a lot of good responses from industry in those creative industries, and especially in the media, film, TV, leisure software in particular. It wasn't much of a reaction. But as digital technology took off, and I'm talking now as the beginning of sort of the smartphone period, really, and getting into that early part of 15 to 20 years ago, the ground shifted substantially. So by the time I was moving into deanships, we were finding that industry wanted to use the infrastructure of creative industries within the academic world to their benefit. And digital cultures only fed that even more greatly. So what we're actually able then to exploit in many ways is the sort of investment institutions have had to make in digital infrastructure to benefit small companies that are working in the creative industries. And therefore the student projects now are not seen to be these quaint exterior things, but seen to be things that can actually feed into the future of those industries. So there's much more collaboration, and the opportunities that's actually emerged from that have meant that students in those areas have tended to get pre-employment and internships before they end up getting full-time work. So just to add that as a sort of extra element of what we do at CUR, obviously, when we're talking about those creative arts, we are in fact talking about career readiness in perhaps a very traditional sense for some folks, but maybe even in a future-looking sense for other people, in the way those industries can actually benefit from the infrastructure that institutions provide for students, faculty, and staff. So yes, it has been a shift, and it's a fascinating element. And I'm not going to promote the session that I'm going to chair. I shall let you see if I'm there. That's the session I'm going to chair. So Duke, because you are the wonderful brains behind this, how would we like to invite people to go off to join one of our 6 breakout sessions? We're going to need you to be unmuted, though. That would be good.
Okay, so you can't hear me when I scream out in the wilderness? Good. We made 6 breakout groups for 6 of us. And like Luke is making the breakout rooms as we speak right now with the titles, innovation, STEM, assessment, business, and all those. And I am at this moment trying to make sure that every room has a Google Doc that you can share and take notes. And like right now, I'm trying to give access. Somehow my Google doesn't believe me that I want to give access. So I sent Luke all the links that are supposed to be like anybody with link can edit, but it's asking me, do you really want to share it with Mona or Catherine? Like, I don't know, that's Google. So I'm kind of updating the access as it happens. So there should be the moderator speaker that actually went in the talk. So Jennifer is going to talk about leadership and the topic that she talked about in IUPUI, and Mona is going to talk about assessment and so on. Please self-select which room you want to be in, and the moderators will probably ask you or assign you like a note taker on the Google Doc. I'll be in the small group discussion thing, the same if you want to know more about it. The breakout rooms are going to be for 30 minutes. So we'll kind of go around, and the big goal for this is just 3 things. What we are doing, what can we do better, how CUR can help, and what are the next steps that you expect CUR to do or would be good, like pie in the sky, anything that you want us to help or work on. We are doing the same kind of workshop for Connect UR. So this is kind of the stepping stone for the Connect UR June virtual meeting. And we will invite all of you to come join us again, but we need to know what we're going to be talking about for that meeting so we can decide like what should our focus is going to be at this point. Am I missing anything, Graham?
That sounds good, Duke. Yeah, we planned this for about half an hour. So again, if we find that people want to go a little longer or a little shorter, that's fine. But we do want to have that open discussion at the end with people reporting back from the different groups. So no, thanks, Duke. That was brilliant. So we're off to the breakouts now then.
Breakout rooms are open.
Okay. Choose a breakout room, folks. Everyone is a winner, as they say.
Welcome back, everyone. My watch might be running a little fast, but I know we'll be getting back to our breakouts here shortly. Graham, do I have you back with us?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Luke, I think you're sort of mid-sentence. A few people will probably cut off there, but yeah, I'm thinking we had it. But that's cool. What we're going to do, of course, thanks, Luke, for getting us. Let's see, we got everybody back, have we? 52 of us or so, which is a good chunk of people. So we've got plenty of time, but on the other hand, we did see this as one of the biggest parts of what we're going to do this afternoon, is that sort of more open reporting back and the chance to talk together. Having said that, we'll turn it over to Duke to do the first report back from the breakout groups. And I say the first one because I will do what could be kind of report back 0, because the innovation group contained the speaker I invited and myself. So on the popularity scale, I'm at the bottom of this, and I have no intention of continuing to do this ever again because my self-esteem has taken a big dive. So yes, innovation report back is Nikunj and I had a 15-minute conversation about innovation. It was great. So that's it. Duke, you, of course, I joined as the first choice after that in terms of supporting what was going on. I know there was some big groups and some smaller ones. I'm sure there's going to be some interesting things from everybody. Would you like to report back on what you were doing with team building there, Duke?
I'm sure, Graham. It's just, it's kind of jarring to have, like, I was listening to Dana and talking about internship and all those projects and how career and things happen, and then boom, I am flown back into the big room. It just kind of shout out to people who are in my group. If there is going to be an assessment, like a Google form sent on the chat pretty soon. So if you want to continue this conversation that got cut off, but or if you have more thoughts that you want to share, please let us know and give us your email contact information so we can keep you involved in this conversation. And about the report out, we kind of had it is a smallish group and had a discussion about how people in different campuses that look for interdisciplinary aspect, how do we talk across silos? So I'm going to quote something from one of the participants that I had, Dana Hansen. She's from nursing, and the students, it's very interdisciplinary, but the students are taught technical skills, which is, tell me about it. But they would be very interested to have this career mapping for NACE, like skills that can actually map into specific career fields. And research probably shouldn't be so a lot of technical research, but how to build the students more holistically as a nurse, so can communicate to patients, to their families, to anybody that needs to communicate and have those skills and competences built into it. And that kind of summarizes everything that we've been talking about. So off to you, Graham.
Cool. Thanks, Duke. Julio, would you like to point out who is going to report back from your group, if it is indeed not you?
Saron, are you comfortable reporting out?
Yes, that's fine. Yes. So we were the industry and business group. And so we just talked about several things that we were doing at our universities, programs that are built on technology and innovation. We're very intentional about that. And then some creating programs that directly connect students to businesses and industry throughout their time as an undergraduate student as well. So being very intentional. One of the things that came out about what can we be doing better in the area of undergraduate research, as well as connecting those skills to business, was that helping faculty and mentors teach students how the skills actually relate to their specific career interests. And so students can learn the skills with relation to their projects or their courses, but showing them how it relates to what they want to do versus the research interest of the mentor, instead of creating mini-me's. And that probably tied over to the NACE and some of the other things that were in some of the other groups. And then also some other things that came up was helping students understand how undergraduate research can be beneficial to their career goals. Sometimes they don't know as well. And then one topic that came up with several of us was connecting the undergraduate research as well as the students to business and industry in ways that you can do that. And so how can we show faculty in departments and institutions? And some of the suggestions that came up that Julio gave was building partnerships with sort of like local boards or companies, go into those events. One of the things was mentioned was the Chamber of Commerce, attending some of those events and parties and connecting with those businesses, taking advantage of alumni, as well as students who are currently doing internships, particularly if those internships are research-based, making those connections as well. And then the last thing, this was a question that came about, was how are campuses promoting the skills that their students have and they're wanting those businesses and industry partners to know about, to say, hey, our students are doing these things. And so what are the marketing strategies to do that? And I know one suggestion was that do we even invite those business partners to our campus when we're having our local university research day or undergraduate research symposiums, do we invite those persons to the campus?
Wow, that is very cool. So yeah, there's a bunch of things there that we can explore when we open this up. And I have to say, Chamber of Commerce breakfasts are the best breakfasts you can go to. So you know, we recommend students just go for the breakfast. But anyway, yeah, thank you. Fabulous. I mean, it might be that as a hub for what comes afterwards. We turn to Jean's group now, because I think there was already connection there in that report out too. So Jean, who was reporting out for you?
So I'm happy to report out for us, right? So we had a big group and an eclectic group. We had faculty, directors of undergraduate research offices, some librarians, some folks from career. And because we had a big group, we talked about a lot of things. We didn't get quite maybe as far as the other groups. But what we did here, we were asking folks why they were here in that group. And so it's some interesting themes. There's a group of folks who this was the NACE language was fairly new to them, right? So that was an interesting piece. There are folks that are doing much of what Jennifer was talking about, right? So that like mapping within classes, right? And developing learning outcomes and assessments that are associated with that. We heard from some folks, a career counselor on what they're doing in terms of helping undergraduate research offices with programming. And QEPs, right? So we're in the SACS conference down here, and several folks were in that group as well. The QEP is our quality enhancement plan that through our accrediting agency every 5 years, folks have to develop one of those and work on that project for 5 years. And what was interesting is several folks had the NACE competencies or career readiness competencies as part of that. The NACE is an organization, the National Association for Career and Employers. I think it's Career and Employers, I think is the acronym. Thank you, Kate, for asking that question, and apologies for just rolling through that. So I think that there's obvious interest and connection. What was also interesting as we started getting into our conversation was the connection to career services, right? And as far as we got until kind of like Juke, so we got pulled back here, was folks talking about that there weren't really, or at least we didn't get to structural connections between undergraduate research offices and career centers, whether they are in academic affairs or student affairs or elsewhere, really, that it was really just personal connection. So I think there is absolutely opportunity for us to explore and demonstrate some of the ways that career, our places, Career and Talent Development Office and our Undergraduate Research Office have partnered in some really intentional and I think beneficial ways for our students and our faculty. So I think that that's something that we can maybe focus on moving forward. I know our undergraduate research office director was here earlier, Joe Weirgall. I don't know if he had to pop somewhere else, but I think we've developed some nice structural, oh, there's Joe, hi Joe, some nice structural relationships on that can really facilitate those conversations, that you're not just relying on someone that you know across campus. So I think that may be something for us to explore in the future. And Jennifer, did I miss anything, or anyone else in our group to pop in?
I think that about covers it. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Jean. We've renamed our careers service Careers and Life Design. So when you said that, and I'm not sure about it, but it's early days, but it's a very interesting renaming to incorporate what sounds like some of the things you were talking about. So really interesting. I can see Mona there. So how about Mona? Mona, are you up for reporting out there, or your group reporting it?
Yes, I'll be reporting out. We met about assessment, and our group consisted of primarily coordinators of undergraduate research. So these institutional partners had deep concern and a lot of experience. And one of the first things we got away under the radar was that none of us have found the holy grail of assessment. There is no instrument that anyone has found that's working wonderfully. There were lots of different methods that had been tried and shifts that had been made for various reasons. So we talked about some of those. We did agree that, student assessment is not reliable and we need, to supplement that or even look at point in time assessment and incorporating journaling and other things that might lead to a more robust overall outlook for that assessment piece. Someone brought to the group that they are trying to find a way to integrate the 8 tenets of high impact practices against the NACE competencies. So that was an interesting thought about assessment. And when we talked about how CUR might help as an organization, really continuing these conversations because of the amount of interest that was displayed today, this seems really important. And we also talked about a repository that might be used. And at University of North Carolina, Charlotte, they do have a database of assessment with a flow chart, and they do want to make that available as a CUR resource. So, it was a really great conversation and a small group. We were all able to talk, and I would welcome any of them to chime in with any additional input they wanted to have.
I think it sounds like you've summarized well, so people can jump in under the general chat when we do that. But I think we have one final one. Catherine, am I right? I will report back.
Yeah, I'm happy to say a few words about what the funding grant writing group discussed. So as you all can imagine, there's never enough money to do everything we want to do, right? So and that I think it's probably is not going to get any better. So obviously the group is interested in finding ways to improve the budgetary scenario. But unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, is there? But I think we talked about, the possibility of pooling different sources of funding together, be it institutional or a combination of institutional and external. Sometimes each pool of money could be small, but when you kind of sum them together, so to speak, that could make a difference. That could at least get something going until you get the next, pool of money and so on and so forth. So then we talked about, how can we find these pockets of money short of, knowing the folks on your institution, if you're talking about internal funding, how can we find these different sources and how can we actually know how to do the ask? So I think that's where perhaps a network of colleagues, including colleagues within CUR, could be helpful because apart from those grant writing institutes, there could be actually folks who have lots of experience in these asks, whatever these asks are, or whoever you're asking, can actually serve as, certainly somebody who can brainstorm with or a consultant. So I think this is something that perhaps there's some interest in forming groups of folks who can kind of, get together and brainstorm, how do you write an ask to a foundation? Because that type of ask is quite different from, say, your normal federal grants, your normal ask to your federal or state funding agencies. We also, it is kind of a interesting conversation, but there's someone within the group that actually talked about, I'm interested in forming a larger team of researchers, including both undergrads and grad students. So perhaps this topic is not directly related to funding and grant writing, but I think there's actually some interesting points that came out of it, because I think when we are thinking of a larger team of researchers, that actually brings in potentially at least multiple sources of funding to support this larger group of students who might come from different departments or different at these backgrounds or places where there could be potential funding sources. And perhaps not directly related to funding, but related to CUR, the missions of CUR and and undergraduate research, is that this particular structure of having a team of researchers actually is really useful when we think about mentoring, peer mentoring, near peer mentoring. But the trick, of course, is, especially if the team is new or the mentor is new, is to find the correct structure to properly support this type of team research structure. So that in fact, I think that is also where CUR can provide some support, because I'm sure there are lots and lots of people with experience with all kinds of structures of teams of researchers where, you know, this type of maybe brainstorming again and or assistance can be found. So I'll stop there.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. So those were the groups then. Duke, you know, again, turning to you as the power behind the whole operation here, I'm thinking our plan was to open things up or to take a break and open things up. It feels like at 3:30, people would probably appreciate some time back at the end if we want to keep going now, rather than to go and then come back. So does that seem okay with you, Duke?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the conversation, and I really
Yeah.
don't want to kind of force myself to take a break and then stop the momentum. And by the way, I'm really getting angry at Google because I'm trying to send the form to people and it's not working. But apparently, Mona managed to get the form to work via email, and I think it is working for some people, but not for others. So Google is being discriminatory, and I don't like that. So if you are if you're willing to send me your email, just send it to my direct chat to me, and I'll send you the form via email that way. Or if you want to click on the link that Mona put up on the chat, and you can go by that way. We are not collecting your email from the Google form, only if you want us to have it. So it doesn't matter through which link you're filling it out. We just want to see what you're thinking and basically what we are missing, what more can we do, how can we build up on this. We don't want this to be a one and done and have all sorts of ideas but nowhere to put it. So please use that and let me know if what can I do to make it better. And let's continue this conversation until everybody loses steam, and then we can leave early if that's that people works.
Thanks, Duke. Luke, I mean, I know this is the case, but just to confirm, this is all going to be recorded, right? So we've got the recording from this that we can refer back to. Yep. So we've got about 20, 25 minutes left in our plan time. Again, we've had the sort of report backs from different groups, but of course there were people in those groups in addition to the people reporting back. So if anybody would like to jump in with anything, it's an open sort of discussion session. I think, and just speaking personally, very briefly, I think there was so much that was reported back and so many things that were mentioned. I couldn't keep up with my pencil with everything that's been mentioned, but I think that that's probably a good thing. As I say, it's a kind of open sort of session now. So over to anybody that wants to jump on in with any comments, any additional things back from the groups, any thoughts about where we might go with the career focused discussion, any of that, or indeed anything else. Over to you.
I'm just curious if anyone has heard from industry about how they might be interested in assessing our students.
I wonder if that's a resounding no.
That's my guess.
Well, really, the interactions I've had, they haven't been interested in assessing our students. I have managed to get a few representatives of different organizations or businesses actually involved in particular courses, truly capstone courses. And I do offer for them, they can literally, the course students are doing work for them, something that they want accomplished. And I do give them the option of determining up to half the course grade for these students based upon their perception of the quality of the students' work, both written and presentation form. Most of them are willing to do that. Not all of them, but most of them are willing to do that. But that's about as far as I've ever gotten any particular participation, let's call it. Anything more complex than that or more involved than that, I have not managed to get that to happen. And maybe it shouldn't. If they don't perceive it that way, well, then perhaps I should not be looking to push that. Another thing possible, I sent the message to Dr. Chan, but I can put it out there. If you have an interest in multi-discipline, multi-participant, large-scale projects, I have experience in that. And if you would like some help or some guidance on that kind of thing, I'd be happy to do what I can for you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
I wonder, it just got me thinking there for a second. I wonder how much, sort of Mona's question and Mike's reference there, really, it got me thinking, how much is the formalization important in terms of undergraduate research and industry response? And what I mean is, if you're a chemistry student that's completed a project and then it's published in some way, is that publication a key part of that relationship with industrial partners or people's perception of your research, rather than simply somebody who reported that they were experienced in an area of chemistry because they'd done some undergraduate research? Is it the formalization that helps that relationship become more strong? And as much as many of us probably spend some time helping students go down things like a publication route, it's probably not the key focus of most projects. It's more the focus of getting the projects done, I think, and so forth. But I just wonder if the industry partners would expect some, dare I say, material evidence, and whether we've got any, thoughts on that. But as I say, I think it picks up on where you were, Mona, just thinking, what do we know? What do we know about these partnerships?
May I?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think, I'm really interested in learning more about how we can be helpful, right? It just seems like even from my small discussion group, we were all over the map in terms of where we were experience-wise or our knowledge base on career competencies and how we can incorporate them more into undergraduate research. And so maybe that's one of the things that we need to hear at this moment, like, where are you in terms of the level of engagement, and how can we assist those who are here, but also CUR? What are some of the things that you would like to see? For some who've already done the work, maybe this works really well. You've been able to hear what others are doing, confirming what you're doing and the importance of it. But then there are others who are at the beginning and they're kind of like, oh, some of the acronyms are flying around and I don't even know what they stand for, right? I think just hearing from folks here, the interest is clearly there on this subject, but what are some of the themes that we need to tackle moving forward? What would you like us to have more informal conversations about? And this is a safe space. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just about, what you would like us to do more of moving forward.
I'd personally like to have more conversations like this, just both in large space and small space. And just as a thing, I'm going to throw out this in the chat. This is not a Google link. It is just the link for a funding source for workshops. And this is like when I kind of got into this, when I was the industry partnerships. And the first thing for this workshop is encourage workshop proposals from a wide variety of organizations across industry, government, academia, and other nonprofit, just to make a workshop to bring people together to see what explore support for innovation at the intersection of culture, creativity, and technology. So something like that, just to get a group together and have some workshops. And I'm not saying that you have to submit funding in 6 weeks, February 16th, or not even 6 weeks, less than a month, but maybe some kind of a conversation across culture, creativity, technology, and invite people in there, have some conversations in, Connect UR or some other space. Maybe that would be a start.
Other folks? Oh, we've got some things in the chat. Building UR community at universities. Cool.
If I could leap in, one of the things that Kate Gambira was talking about, and she was speculating, but I thought the ideas were really good in terms of just how do we market this whole idea of our students have a whole variety of research skills that are transferable skills for employers, and how do we bring those about? How do we make those intersections and creating a knowledge base about how to do that. And I think that was an important insight.
Yeah. Yeah, I must admit, I do spend a lot of time talking to people about how great the students are, and I don't necessarily have a map of what I mean by that. It's kind of, I know they're great. They did this great project. It was really good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, something even tangible that we at our universities could point to in different ways. And so I to bring that out might be a nice thing for us to look at.
Is that maybe, Julio, not to sort of stretch the point too much, but I think it's a good point. Is that essentially develop some sort of evidence-based, when we do this on the CUR website, even just, these are what things people, but you're more talking about how do we break it down under that basis of how that relates to a career trajectory or skills that might relate to industry and so on, rather than just here's my experience.
Yeah, almost, one of the things in higher ed, we're all concerned about, reputation, enrollment, those questions. And one of the things I think it's easily demonstrable for a variety of schools and a variety of disciplines to talk about that in ways that, really lay out the value proposition for employers and the community. And I think as we talk about, what our students can do more and more, I think that becomes important. So.
Yeah. Interesting. There's a couple of things there in the chat, if people are seeing those. How do we help the humanities and social sciences see the value of research? We've got institutional UR.
If I could chime in on that one a little bit.
Yeah.
I think humanities and social sciences are so valuable to the larger business community in a variety of ways that the promotion of what students in those disciplines can do and how they are valuable in those workspaces, both as interns, as research interns, and as eventually as employees, I think that's an important story to tell, and to develop that. So
I wonder on that front, Julio, if something around the definition, if we like, of what we mean by critical thinking or critical skills, or I've used those terms interchangeably and frequently, but they're not particularly specific. If I was sitting in a company and I was told this student has good critical skills, I'd probably want to say, what do you mean?
That's often the question that I get. What do you mean by that? And even when I'm talking about things that are more technical, like, Julio, what do you mean by that? And so to tell the story in a way that the people we want to understand it will resonate with.
Yeah. Is that a one we'd like to pick up on there, Duke, in the chat? Lance's, yeah.
There are two things that I kind of seeing a lot of reaction getting. One is Lavanya Siddharamazu's point as how do we help humanities and social sciences? And Jennifer, if you're listening, this is for you. How do we help the humanities to be in a STEM your thing? And Lance comment of resource list and train the trainer in efforts to build awareness, buy-in and across the institution. It's a language gap in how academics talk about professional skills and how employers ask about it in interviews and how students encounter it outside the university. That's, I think, a big point right there. Like, how do you speak across all these practitioners?
Yeah, I guess I could say something about the humanities and social sciences. I think what it calls for in order for us to make progress there is just a change in our mindset and how we approach research and maybe how we define it as well. Would be a starting place, right? So that we know it's not only what happens in labs, right? But I also think the way in which we allocate our resources can be a determining factor there too. If we're not going to be supporting, the arts and social sciences, then people are not going to see the value in it, even though we know, as we're talking about career competencies, all employers want those skills that our students who are enrolled in classes that are within the humanities and the creative arts, it's what they want, right? They want strong writers, oral communication needs to be strong. They want folks who can use good, solid ethical judgment, right? When they're making decisions. All of these things are critical and important, but if we don't put resources into them, then we're not saying that they're valuable. Or when you're doing your strategic planning, and I'm speaking here as an administrator who has to sit in rooms and listen to the folks who are a little higher up talk about what our strategic plan is going to look like, and you talk about all the great things you want to do for student success, and the liberal arts isn't included at all, right? You're not touching on the humanities and the social sciences. So I really think a lot of it has to do with the shift that we have to make, in terms of how we view and define research, but also how we allocate our resources and the messaging that we send about the various disciplines and how we prioritize them.
Then indeed, we do have the Lance, as you pointed out there, Duke, the Lance point, and that's a fabulous one that Mona's picked up on. I don't know, Mona, do you want to jump in and start a bit of a addition to that one? Because that's a fabulous question about our language gap.
Well, I feel like that in my community, I'm able to do that as I do attend chamber events and I'm very involved locally. I just see this national trend and a push in my field regarding funding. I see there's just some gaps there that aren't necessarily location based. And the long-term goal of the federal government may be to support more location-based research, which would mean, hubs and relocating for that purpose. So it's a bit daunting and overwhelming because the long-term implications of this are enormous.
Cool. Anyone else? And we've also got Julie's comment there on the Undergraduate Research Office, career management, working with researchers. There's questions there maybe between Lance and Julie, questions coming up about central resourcing of what we do and some of the ways in which career services link to it or don't link to it. Questions, of course, again, just throwing this out for anything people want to comment in these last few moments, that relationship between perhaps the career side of institutions, which may indeed be in student affairs, and then the research office, which may be somewhere completely different. Is there a relationship built there? Those kinds of questions may be worth touching on. But yeah, both Julie and Lance have gone into those two areas if anybody's got any thoughts.
So I'll say perhaps here we're at an advantage because undergraduate research and career services are in this same, like they report to the same boss and we're in the same division. And so it's been really helpful here. So I endorse definitely making those connections, been really helpful for us to work a partnership and sort of inform them more about the value of undergraduate research and how to help students present it, but that so that they know more about what it is, but then also for them to help us sort of think about how we talk to the students about it and how we remind the students what the goals are and how we reinforce how we really want them to talk about it and how we want them to learn through the process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting, actually. Julio might have a thought, or Jennifer, or even if Lindsay's still here. Has CUR ever done a study of the structural relationship between research and careers officers within campuses? It strikes me that that's something I hadn't thought about. I would definitely say our careers, which, as I said to Jean earlier, our careers office is now called Career and Life Design, which fundamentally doesn't reference research and is thinking about a completely different picture of what career actually means. But our research office is quite literally in another building and 3 floors, 4 floors up. And I'm not sure those folks have ever been in the same room for the same reason. So I'm suspecting many campuses would have that structure of a complete devolution of those two areas, and others, which sounds like Lance is giving an example of, have brought them together. Have we ever looked at that? Is an interesting question. I hadn't even thought of it.
You know, I'm not sure we have, and I think that's part of the piece that Jean is bringing out in her work, and making that line more specific. But the way you're speaking of it, there's nothing in my head that says that we've looked at that directly beyond what we're doing at the moment. And you know, I think it's a fertile field. So,
Brandy's got a comment on that too in the chat. So yeah, some folks, and Karina, we've got some some interesting discussions there about structural. I know that we've discussed it at large with the representatives for just on a couple of years now. Probably it's coming up to that, where we've started to have discussions and projects built around structural discussions on undergraduate research. Where is it funded? Who controls it? And who actually sort of relates to it? And it feels like this is a more nuanced and specific reference to that. You know, how does it work, particularly with that career side? I'm glad Brandy has introduced the word chaos at this point in affairs rather than 2 hours ago. So that's appreciated. We're probably getting to the sort of wrap-up point, Duke. And as I say, I mean, I want to really emphasize how much Duke has helped. I've been sort of, you know, the voice more so here, but it really has been Duke that got this together. So Duke, would you like to do a sort of bit short and sweet, obviously, wrap up a few words?
Thank you. And this was fun. This was something oh, please, Jennifer, thanks. Now, this is something I'm passionate about making students be career ready. I mean, we teach them, we make them graduate, and then what? So I like to have this wraparound mentoring kind of come across. And this was just so heartening to see so many people joining in and talking about these things. And so I don't feel kind of siloed, separate out, and I'm the only one who thinks those crazy thought kind of things. I promise I'll make sure somehow with Luke or somebody to have the assessment, the form to get to all of you. I got 9 people's responses, but I think there is a little few more than 9 people actually joined. So I'd like to see as much, you know, input as possible, because we are planning on a Connect UR workshop on this topic, like a 10-minute presentation for 2 different groups of people, and we'll bring in some of the same speakers, some of different speakers. Maybe we can have 2 different sessions, and instead of having one and pack everything into one, but we'll pack. And then I'm thinking more future steps, because this is not a one and done. This has to be, we have to build up on this, and where do we go from there? So I'm going to put my email on the chat. I'm very responsive to emails, better than my Googles. But if you want to keep the conversation going, please let me know. And
Thanks.
that's about it.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for sort of taking the lead on getting this going. At Large is very interested, obviously, in collaborating with everybody. Thus the name At Large. So let us know if you want to get involved, as Duke said, but also that as a division, we're very interested in collaborating and would love to collaborate with other divisions on this. We're going to sort of wrap it up at this point. Thanks to the speakers who spoke at the beginning, Julio, Jennifer's here, and Mona, and so on. And thanks to those that actually helped with the breakout sessions as well, which was indeed some of the same people. But thank you very much, and thanks for being with us. We'll actually hope to see it connect you are on that development of this topic. Indeed, thank you. I guess we want a quick word at the end here, Luke. But other than that, we'll see everybody later.
Thank you all so much for your time today. And yeah, we'll send a follow-up email with information about accessing the recording, as well as the assessment and all of those good things. So look for that from CUR very soon.
Thanks, Luke.
Have a good weekend, everyone.